Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Data Delicacies. We bring the best and brightest in the industry to talk all things data, talk all things tech, and there's a lot going on. And as you know, I'm your host, Arun. This is powered by Incentivio, and today we have a very special guest, someone I call a true friend in this industry. He's spent a lot of time in this industry. You see him at all the shows. You see him on LinkedIn. Spreading a lot of good knowledge about what's going on. He's been on great experience on both the brand and the operator side with many years at Punch, and then over at Fat Brands and Craveworthy, and now the CRO of Hang. Super excited to have Jeremy Theisen on the show. Jeremy, what's going on?
Not too much. I'm not used to talking to you without either a golf club or an espresso martini in my hand, so it feels a little
Yes,
foreign to
yes.
me.
I know. I should have got those prepared beforehand. I should have had what sent over to you, but don't worry. We'll make it up at the next year, I'm sure. So Jeremy, I kind of want to dive right into it. We've been seeing at a lot of the conferences, which we see each other a lot at, but just even conversations on LinkedIn and all these different shows about this whole concept of customer attraction and customer retention, right? Which a lot of these brands now are trying to tackle. It's becoming a very competitive space, and you've now lived on both sides of that coin. So I want to start there with that first is, your general thoughts on that piece and what are you hearing from both what you've heard from the brand side, but now what are you also trying to tackle on the vendor side?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think we always have to back up and think about like solutions that I have, solutions that you have, and any other competitors in the space. It's one thing to put a tool in a marketer's hands. It's another thing to tell a marketer you've now got a budget to go out and tell your customers about this tool, right? So, when I was at both Fat and Craveworthy, I think I worked with one of the brightest marketers in the space in Warwick McLaren. His ability to work with, large budgets, small budgets, no budgets, and whether that was, the way that he was able to find offers that resonate with our regulars to get them in more frequently because they're just always, paying attention to our brand. So how do we get a couple more visits out of them? But then there's the expansion side, right? And so if you're having a hard time expanding because you have low ad budgets to let people know, what you're doing, he was incredible about leveraging, third party and advertising on third party during downtimes. And we had a location, interestingly enough, that during the day was challenging. And then we found out that one of our core competitors closed at 9. And so we dominated
Mhm.
third party from like 9 to 2 a.m. But this was work really doing that kind of advanced research and saying, why are sales so great during this time period? And finding a niche and saying, you know what, we're fine being like the go-to late night spot. But, I think in a world right now where budgets are so tight, um, one, I think you have to partner with vendors that are going to go the extra mile and truly be an extension of your team. I think it's also easier when you're a smaller tech company because the smaller tech companies offer and operate because they're hungry and they're scrappier, more like a boutique. So your service is white glove. And I think what ultimately happens is, when you start to work with a brand, when they're small, you're like, man, they're the best, service is great, they're doing everything for me.
Yeah.
But the challenge is when you get 3, 4, 5 years in and you're massive and like all of a sudden that same service goes away because it's not scalable. So all of a sudden that becomes are you unhappy with your vendor or are you just not getting the service you're accustomed to, which is not scalable? And I think that's where, a number of companies that have popped up in our space have done a great job on the services side. I put a thing on LinkedIn yesterday, actually talking about some of those companies that both in marketing, technology, deployments,
Yeah.
implementation. But I think space is really hard right now. And if you're a restaurant marketer, what I would tell you is if you're exploring a new job, I think the first thing you have to ask about, like, is the tech stack on or off limits? If the tech stack is on limits, then it has to be, okay, if I go and put something new in place, do I have an ad budget now to let my consumers know about it? Because if you don't, you're taking a job that's really, it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard.
Yeah. No, I no, appreciate your insight there. I mean, what I see too is that there's obviously a ton of data to be captured, right, on both the attraction and the retention side. But a lot of it sounds like, there's a lot of tools out there to capture it, but you need to have kind of those people in house to actually utilize that data in the right way. But to your point, a very cost efficient way, which can sometimes seem maybe daunting to some folks, but other folks, depending on the size of your brand, it's something that you can fairly easily do.
Yeah, and I was actually just talking to um, uh, Paul over at Plain Air earlier today, and it was our exact conversation. It's like, I could take four loyalty companies in our space and walk through a checklist that all of their tools do these 15 things, right? So like call it a commodity to some degree. But then what happens is you hand this off to a 25-year-old marketer who had a communications degree and their CMO is busy doing CMO stuff and they're just like, what do I do? And so what happens is they run lapsed user campaigns, they run birthday campaigns. And when you look at your inbox, like obviously a student of this industry, and you probably are the same, I have every single loyalty app known to man, and I get all of these offers that all look and feel the same.
Yeah.
And I think going back to that the ad budget, if you've got a user base of 100,000 people, I mean, how many times can you truly get that, that like, let's just say for the industry, 15% participation rate. So that 15% of your user base, how many times can you get them into your gelato stand, right? Or your Italian restaurant, right? There's just
Yeah.
there's a ceiling. So you have to be constantly growing that database, and that takes ad funds. Now, there's also brands that have much lower participation rates. And I think that comes back to the person that's using the tool. And so I actually think that the opportunity, so what I don't think is going to change is that these brands are going to suddenly get very large budgets to hire super senior people to sit behind Hang or Incentivio or any other platform, right? So I think that the only way for guys like us to move the industry forward is to develop tools a lot more focused on AI that bridge the gap between what the tool can do, what we think consumers want, and a solution that can really dig into that data to tell even you and I what should we be pushing out for offers or promos or
Yeah.
what does that look like? And I think that's the biggest opportunity in our space. I truly do because I don't see people going to school with a restaurant digital marketing degree and they're going to
Yeah.
come out and go, I got this magic campaign to run. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I think taking the guesswork out of it is on us as solutions providers to make that much easier. Because I think, end of the day, if you can compile all the data you want and put it in all the dashboards you want, but if the person on the other side of that screen, to your point, maybe it's a younger person just coming to the industry or whatever that is, if they're completely disconnected what that data even means or what they can do with it, then it doesn't matter how much data, if you have 10 data points or a million data points, you're just going to be like, well, I'm just going to run a birthday campaign, which they can do with the most rudimentary technology
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah. I mean, even look at the other side of the business, right? So like, restaurant space is interesting because everything is, year over year sales. I've been on a million calls at tons of brands and it's like, okay, we're down 3% where we were last year. Well, last year, on the same date, it was Valentine's Day, and that fell on a Wednesday versus a Friday, right? So it's going to have an
Right.
impact. But you have plenty of technologies on the operations side, even a lot of POSs that are giving some form of predictability on labor, and you're able to make some educated guesses, and you're having technologies that are at least leading you or giving you some indicators. And that still just is so lacking on the marketing side. A lot of these promotions that people run are still pretty, unless you're the upper, top 3%, right? Where like Taco Bell or
Yeah.
Chipotle put something out like, staff up, right? But like for the average operator in our space, it's just not happening right now.
Mm. Mm. And so, I mean, I think that what I'd love to kind of dive into now is a little bit of your experience, right? So you I've lived on both sides of the coin. I think you recently called it coming back to the dark side. So welcome back. And
Thanks.
what I want to ask so just to give, I mean, I know I touched on at the beginning of the show, but you spent many, many years at Punch and then went over to the brand side at Fat Brands and Craveworthy. So what was your attraction to come back into the loyalty word? Because again, loyalty, I think, the reason I came here is there's a ton of opportunity to change the way loyalty is looked at, but at the same time, it is a very competitive and saturated space. So having done it for so many years, what was that draw for you to come back to Hang and do what you're doing now?
Yeah. So, I think, my time at Punch was absolutely the highlight of my career. My team, the culture, the We had no marketing dollars. Everything was, part of the day we're fundraising, part of the day we're building all the integrations to every POS and ordering company. And, we grew very parallel with Olo at one point. I think we're about the same size financially, shared a lot of customers. And, there was not as many loyalty players then. There wasn't as many ordering players then as there are now. And so, in many regards, it was greenfield and semi early. I think at that
Mm.
point in time, Paytronix was absolutely like the big boy in the space. And we were just hungry and it was grinding. And when I went to the brand side, it was more like I'll call it an education in many things. One being how brands really make decisions. I joke, but like I started to think about saying any vendor that calls me before I'll let you pitch me, I want you to come work in my restaurant for 2 days. And then I want you to tell me if you think your technology would actually work. And I can tell you that 60% of vendors that reach out to me, maybe higher, I think after 2 days, they'd probably be looking for a new job when they actually saw it in practicality. Um, but when I came back over to the brand side in my second stint, and I was spending a lot of time on our technology, even to the point where like I was installing point of sale because I just really wanted to understand the tech and be very intimate with how it worked and kind of what my teams in the field went through. Um, like the fire in my belly came back in the whole tech world. And so I took a call earlier this year through Juwan and Marty at 858. Good buddies of mine, scaled our companies together in parallel back in 2018, 2019. And they wanted me to evaluate this company. And they actually kind of were calling bullshit. They're like, evaluate this company we're looking at doing some advisory work for and tell me if it's real. It's in the loyalty space. So I get on a call and I put the founders through the ringer, got off the call, and I'm like, man, if this really does what they say it does, this is game changing. But if like, I need more proof. So for the next few months, was just doing some advisory work, looking at the product roadmap, challenging them. And ultimately, what I landed on was like, they actually have tools that can really help brands. And the most attractive thing to me is that they built it in a modular fashion. So as opposed to my previous life where I had to go in and go into every single deal and compete with every loyalty person. And it came down to, who do they like more? Where was the price going to end up? And, I would say most deals, they were one in the back alley. They're not one on the RFP, as you know. Um,
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? I never wanted to come back into that space. I never wanted to live in that like drag out dogfight for every loyalty dollar, right? And so I think some of it's just maturity, honestly. From the way I would have sold back then to the way that I would approach the business now. But
Yeah.
the fact that everything is modular, and I truly think that I can lend a lot of help to these restaurants and operators. And I also can partner with any of the guys that I used to compete with, and insert, one of our modules or bolt on something that we do really well. That's more of a niche item. It just feels like a very different approach to the market. And there's going to be deals where, Hang has a, all-in-one solution. But, if I were to say, Incentivio has a customer right now that loves the Incentivio team, they just don't feel like the tools they're using, I shouldn't say the tools they're using. They just feel like the program right now is semi-stale to their customer base and it just needs a boost. I can absolutely work with Incentivio to layer in or bolt on some of our interactive tools, which is essentially gamifications or quests. And so,
Right.
we
Right.
did this in parallel with Ulta Beauty. They have a massive database, and going into it, we didn't know what the outcome would be, and we stood up a separate parallel one for them with some of their very specific users. And just with the gamification alone, it was a refresh for them. It was like 80% of people that interacted with one of the games transacted within 7 days. So
Mm.
again, we can come in and kind of turbocharge an existing program that's working mechanically like it should. Where the vendors have like where you have a great relationship with your customer, like we're not looking to move on from them. We just need something. We just need more tools. So,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
there's some other companies out there that are doing a good job in the more bespoke world. But yeah, I think that was kind of what was exciting to me is to kind of come back, young founders, young company, help shape the product roadmap, and then I think really just kind of appreciate the impact that I can make on a brand that I don't know that I understood that impact having no brand experience at Punch.
Right, right. Yeah, I know. I mean, I can only imagine opening up the stores, installing some of those tourist terminals yourself. You
Yeah.
probably learned firsthand what they go through. So now you can speak to it like and actually be like, hey, listen, I was in your shoes. I understand what this is like. I want to touch on the gamification piece. I think that's something, as we look at marketing, right? And you got to market to the people, you got to do it in a way that's going to resonate with them. And, younger generation now it's all about the phones, right? It's all about very quick, digestible stuff. No one's going to look at these long emails anymore, right? So gamification,
Yeah.
we're seeing, and just, I mean, I know from my own life, there's so much stuff where I'm like, okay, this is gamification, this is cool. That kind of attracts me to it. So talk a little bit about that. I mean, do you see that becoming more a part of the engagement strategy of these brands to have some sort of gamification? And where do you see it potentially evolving into as time goes by?
Yeah, so I think there's two sides to that. So there's one idea of what we would call like challenges or quests, right? So like let's just say you're a brand that has online ordering and you also have e-commerce through like Shopify, right? So like use coffee for example. So you sell your whole beans, but then you also have those are shipped at home through Shopify and you have your in-store typical online ordering, right? So like, a quest, you might know that your e-com has the highest average order value. Second is your online ordering, and then third is kind of your in-store, just coming to get a coffee, right? And so, having things like quests that are tied to points or some mystery prize where, the quest is consisted of ordering through each of those channels, right? So now that I've got you in my ecom channel, I can start to market to you through my ecom channel. I've got your address. I can target you a lot differently. So when I think about quests, it's like me as the brand is dictating what the customer does. Like I'm pushing them where I want them to go. And maybe it's with a discount, maybe it's not. Now, the gamification side, I think, is a little different, and I think it actually talks to a lot of different generations. You're on planes all the time. How many people do you see from like 25 to 65 playing Candy Crush or Wordle, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
so
that's me.
those
I'm,
are
I'm both. Yeah.
so like those are think about a world where you're in an Incentivio app for a brand that's high frequency, right? So like and you get a pop-up like, hey, Arun, play Wordle today. You get three chances, and there's this mystery box or this prize. You get in there, like I play Wordle all the time. You play it. Let's just say you don't succeed. And the next step is, hey, check into the restaurant and everything through and essentially through geolocation. I'm getting you
Mhm.
now to go into a restaurant, probably make a transaction, and then you get another try. And then let's just say you succeed in that level. There's some prize or some mystery for you, some mystery box for you. So it adds surprise and delight
Right.
also. But I think what this really does is um, I always use when I talk about some of the stuff that we're able to add and bolt on and supercharge other programs is like if you look at the Starbucks app, I use it for I literally just reload money, I place my order and I go in. I'm never even on their like home screen. Now my family, my daughters, my wife, they use the full stack, right? They're on this
Mhm.
quest. They're looking at like all their points, they're redeeming offers. Like this allows flexibility to get away from just earn and burn programs and have every customer have their own journey and how they interact because we can put in quest games and then sit on top of uh, tiered memberships and standard programs and now
Yeah.
consumers they can all engage with the brand how they want to. And I think that's the future of like again with these things, as you know, people have very small attention to anything, right? So like how can you get them to be more interactive?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good point because I mean, you see now multiple generations interacting on the same app, but they're not going to be drawn with the same experience, which
100%.
means you have to have, more optionality and you can't just kind of have a cookie cutter loyalty program. And, actually, I mean, you brought this up a few times, but the one thing we hear from a lot of our customers, prospective customers, but just people in the industry where it's like, we don't want a loyalty program to just be a discounting engine, right? Like that's not the
Yeah.
point of this, which sometimes and it ends up defaulting that to it goes back to our initial conversation where there's all this data, there's all this stuff you have with loyalty, but then they don't know what to do with it. So you just default to being okay, well, if you have this many points, you get a 10% discount. But I know just in my own personal experience, like after a while, 10% for me, I'm like, just whatever, like 10%, 10%,
I
right?
think
That's
you
not
see that in
that
retail, right?
bad.
Like
Yeah.
Nordstrom, right? Like I go spend $1,000 and I get a $10 certificate. Like It has no value to me. Like it's going to
Yeah.
cost me more than that to drive to a Nordstrom near me. But um, yeah, I think there's this other concept that we've played with for some of our brands where it's this world, and and I'll be honest, it's it's tough for brands to wrap their head around. But think about a world where the entire thing is surprise and delight to the consumer. But from a brand perspective, vendor perspective, we 100% have points behind the scenes, and I know exactly when I'm going to trigger something for you, right? So
Right.
there's this whole concept of also like, um, I think surprise and delight in the past has been the way it's been kind of modeled is that was really targeted offers. It's like you still get 300 points, you get a free coffee, but then like you might get an offer in your email. Like to me, that's not surprise and delight. That's just personalization.
Mm.
Um, because you at the end of the day, you don't know when you're going to get an offer from a brand, but like true surprise and delight is like a non-published loyalty program where the brand really knows your buying habits and when to strike to get you to make another purchase or as you know, like shorten the purchase between visits 2 and 3, or if I don't get past visit 2, I'm going to churn. And so I think, that to me is the true kind of surprise and delight. And there's brands right now that are just none of us can get into because they do not believe in a published loyalty program.
Mm.
Because to date, when you think about loyalty, CFOs think earn and burn, and they're like, CFOs all say, well, they would have come in anyway. Why are we discounting them? And I think there's a flawed argument for that too. But um,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
there's a whole touched area in our space that's very untouched right now. It's a huge opportunity.
Yeah. So, I mean, that actually brings me to kind of my next point here. And, I mean, the elephant in the room is like we compete in some sense. And I know we were joking about this at FS
Yeah,
Tech, but at the same time, we're both hospitality people. And the reason why we're in this industry is to help the industry, right? Like, this isn't like I joke about this all the time, and people are like, oh, you're hanging out with these guys, you're competitors, and it's like, eh, yeah, but we're trying to solve the problem together at the end of the day,
yeah,
right? Regardless if we're working for this isn't a gang, this isn't Bloods and Crips, like
yeah.
it's not that serious. So, I how much of it do you think is on us, on the side that we are to educate to better educate operators out there, maybe some of the smaller ones that are like, hey, I don't know if this is the right thing for me. This is maybe
Yeah.
not the right spend. Like, I think there's a gap in education where, again, if they feel it's just an earn and burn thing, I feel it's almost on us where we haven't educated them in the right way to say like, hey, this is much more than that. So how much do you think that's on us? And how much do you think we can change the narrative of how loyalty is looked at and how we can truly help a brand get from here to here?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've always been very consultative in my career. You know, I I've spent a lot of time as a Toast Advisory Board member. I have great relationships with Nico at Q. If I walk into a room and I meet with a brand, I'm going to send them down the right path for their brand, not for me as an advisory board member or a independent contractor for some company or something like that. For my entire career, like I've never moonlighted. I didn't feel like it was I didn't feel like it was fair or I could be objective if I was getting paid. I think the
Right.
unfortunate part of our industry is go to a trade show. I'm not going to name names, but there are, let's just call it 4 to 5 regulars that are consultants. I've been a vendor working with those consultants, and it's ironic how the same vendor always wins the deal.
Mm.
I can tell you right now, if I went into 4 different brands right now, the likelihood of Incentivio or Hang being the sole right choice for all 4 of those is very low, right? Depending on their business model. And so I think it first starts with cleaning house with the dinosaurs in our brand that are pushing brands into wrong decisions. And I call it hanging around in our industry, still getting paid and paid to go
Mm.
to trade shows and hang out with their buddies. That's number one. I think number two, there's 2 buckets of vendors in our space. There are the vendors that I think are truly trying to do right by brands. Now, I've been fortunate enough in this industry where, with our success at Punch, like it's a choice now for me to come to work every day and work in the space, right? So now for me, it's more about like, how can I truly help brands now? Because I don't have to win every
Yeah.
deal. I just don't. And so there's the group of people that will partner with people that are open to having conversations and saying like, hey, I think 1 + 1 = 3 with our solutions. I might make a little bit less money, but I actually think this will be stickier and the results of this are going to be incredible. And then there's the bucket that are all they care about is a technology exit. They're extremely insecure. They have to win every single deal. If they don't, they burn the bridge. I talk to brands every day. They're like, I will never touch this company. Or I talk to brands that are like, hey, we were transitioning from loyalty company A to transitioning to loyalty company B. Company C lost the deal. Company B actually failed to deploy us, and we would have gone back to company C, but they burned the bridge afterwards. So
Yeah.
my view in this space has always been a no in what we're doing right now is a not yet. Like if you truly are building a great product and you have great relationships, which you do, they'll come back. And
Yeah.
at the same time, like it's 100% okay for me to lose a deal. Now, do I like it? No. But I think if a brand just says, I truly believe in postmortems. I put it into every company I've been into. I want to postmortem. I want to understand what I could have done better, what my team could have done better, where there were product gaps. And then we will go and we will plug those, or we'll just acknowledge that, like, that's not what we're looking to do. And
Yeah.
so, I look at so we're at FS Tech, right? We played golf on Sunday. Incentivio, Hang, Punch, Patronics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I call that it's like the NATO of the marketing community, right? So, but yeah, we had drinks, we had beers, we talked about the space, we talked about like,
Yeah.
deals that are won and lost. And again, there's plenty of addressable market. And again, you'll either win by being a great partner. There's also the opportunity I've seen brands win through attrition because their competitors are just chasing custom, and they go away, they run out of money. So I think if you associate yourself with like-minded companies and people, then it'll
Yeah.
all work out. It absolutely will.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I know we've chatted about this a ton. I think what we also see a lot of is, to your point, brands or sorry, vendors reaching for brands that are not the right fit for them, right?
Mhm.
Like it's out of their wheelhouse. It's not even their ICP. Maybe they're too big for them, but it's to your point, they need it for,
It's that,
an
it's
exit, or they
this.
need it is this, or they need it for,
Yeah.
they need a shout out from they have this brand. But what they don't realize is that if you don't service a customer the right way and you lose a brand, that's even bigger news, right? It's way bigger news to lose the brand than it is to win the brand. And everyone, because the
So
question's, okay, well,
yeah,
why did you lose that brand?
it's funny you said that. So when I landed at Hang, the first conversation I had with Matt, the CEO, was Matt, you're not going to like the sound of this because you hired me to press the gas pedal, but we need to slow down to speed up. And what I meant by that was I can reach out to my network and I get any meeting, right? Like regardless of if they're happy with their provider and so on. But I'm not going to walk in any of our products that I don't feel like are fully baked. Now, I'm not saying that our products aren't fully baked, but I'm just saying I know these brands intimately and I know exactly what they need. So if we need to
Right.
spend a 2 week sprint to develop one thing that I think is going to resonate with them, then we will do that before we're going to go and present something half baked.
Yeah.
Um, and in a situation where we have a product that's like more beta, like that will be 100% disclosed to a customer on say, hey, listen, I can tell you right now, these two or three functions are going to be incredible in 3 months. If you want to be go to market, just know you got to grow with us, right? And that's
Yeah.
okay too. But I couldn't agree more with you. And I think the one, people always go back and forth like, do people like or hate their POS companies, right? Like it's kind of like having a washing machine and it breaks. You're like, I got to buy a new washing machine. Like,
Yeah.
but you can't not have one and offers value every day. So like, I actually think the POS companies do a really good job at, pushing their modules for, SMB and then building a big ecosystem of integration partners for
Yeah.
mid-market and enterprise. And I just think they're really good at understanding like where their strengths and weaknesses are. I mean, you see Q and Toast do it all the time. I think they're kind of running a master class in that area, right?
Yeah.
So um, I think loyalty companies need to do a better job at kind of self-reflection of where their products really, really do well at.
Yeah. Especially because loyalty can be so nuanced,
Mhm.
and there's so many different layers. And I think with loyalty now, we've already talked about a few things like gamification and all this stuff. I think there's only going to be so many more new things that come up, every 6 months, based on how technology is advancing and how, some folks want to maybe be cutting edge when it comes to loyalty, other ones want to fall back. But in terms of like, how do you keep up with the technology to make sure that you're attracting, all generations of guests? We talked about like you could have a 6-year-old on there, you can have a 15-year-old on the app, right? So
Yep.
making sure you can attract all of them. I think that's you kind of have to stay ahead of the curve. And the further you fall back, then it becomes to a point where, okay, well, why would a brand want to go with an archaic platform when their competitor, or let's say it's a coffee shop, a competing coffee shop down the street has a way better loyalty program, and that's getting all the people to go
Yeah.
over there.
Well, I mean, just think about when you talk about just attracting generations, like think about, so I think about when I joined Punch, right? So our competitor had long form sign up because you wanted as much data as possible. And at that point in time, people were willing to do it. And then we were, I think, the first to launch social sign on, log in with Facebook. And then, as you know, all those rules change. And now there's the now moving to phone number MFA, right? So like
Yeah.
it's just that alone is 100% like catering to crowds. Like I just saw my United app just move to phone number, right? So
Yeah.
um and like phone numbers are standard, and talking to brands that are using social are like confused about like, well, why the switch, right? So um just even just downloading and signing on is different. I live in the Midwest. I don't love Starbucks. I'm a Dunkin' guy, but I've become more of a Starbucks guy. And I've actually always said like I would never let a loyalty program kind of sway me, but like
Hmm.
Dunkin's program used to be so rich, very targeted offers to the point of like if the Cubs win today, I would get an offer
Hmm.
because I'm a Cubs fan. When I go in my offer section now, it is bare. It is 100% earn and burn and payment utility and order ahead. And if you gave me all things being equal, I would go to Dunkin' 10 times out of 10 over Starbucks. But Starbucks is actually speaking to me in a better manner where it's more interactive and it's one to one. The offers are actually more attractive. And in a
Yeah.
tough economy, like $2 or $3 a day difference on a coffee, 365 days a year, and sometimes twice is
Yeah.
a big difference, right? Especially when you end up buying coffee for four people in your household because one's off the couch, so that's five. It's an expensive day, but yeah,
Yeah.
you have to be able to adjust with the times. And I think kind of back to our point earlier about there's the tools and there's the marketers. I think one of the best examples I can use is for people that go into competitive deals and attack the competitor. This is one of the things that I'll mention because I've seen it happen on LinkedIn and I giggle. So you've got I could pick an Incentivio account and you go through the UI UX and I could be like, this didn't work great and this didn't work great. But at the end of the day, what really matters is the outcome, right? The results.
Yeah.
So I've seen competitors go on and they bash Punch and they've got links on their website. And then on the other hand, I see them go on LinkedIn and just gush over how great Taco Bell Rewards is. Well, guess who powers Taco Bell Rewards? It's a little company called Punch. It's one of the best
Yeah.
deals that we did at that company. Okay, two brands, 10 unit, 5,000 unit, same tool, different marketers, right? So do they suck or do they not? Because I've seen on the same day you say both, right? But again, to my point is the tools are only as good as the people driving them. It's no differently than like if you put me in a room and you put me on Excel, the way that I'm going to use Excel compared to like our CFO, it's going to be night and day. Like you're not
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
want my you're not going to want my pivot tables. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's the you hit the nail right on the head. The analogy I always use for that is the gym, right? You talk about you can have
yeah.
someone that has the worst gym equipment or no gym equipment that does just straight body calisthenics and can hit
Prison workout,
shreds. Yeah,
prison
prison
workout.
workouts, right?
Yep.
And then you can have someone that has the best gym in the world but just doesn't do the work. The equipment's
Yep.
there. It's what you make of it. And it could be the most rudimentary stuff. I mean, you
Hmm.
talk about like David versus Goliath, right? The guy uses, a little slingshot to beat the thing. So it's like
Yep.
it goes back to the dawn of time where to your point, like it's you can have all the things in front of you, but it's only as good as you use it. And that's why, it's funny. We talk about this whole thing about tech and tech's going to take people's jobs and all that stuff. It's like, no, like the tech is only as good as the people that do the input, right? I think ChatGPT is a great example of that. I know
Yep.
people that use ChatGPT for like it's Google. I know other people that use ChatGPT to like I've learned so much about from other people have told me how to use ChatGPT where I'm like, holy crap, this is like insane. But we both have access to the same ChatGPT. It's just how you use it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like you said, it's putting in the work, right? Like I've been spending a lot more time on ChatGPT and same thing, understanding new commands and ways to use it. And like, whereas like for high school kids, it's second nature, right? Like they'd probably be able to teach us how to use it much more effectively. But yeah, I mean, again, I think, I remember when loyalty first launched and I would go to a meeting and this always baffled me because the question would be, okay, so if we put this in, like, how many hours a week do we need to spend in here? And my first thought was like, it's like going to a job interview and the first question you ask is how many vacation days you get. It's like a big red
Mhm.
flag, right? So it's like, well, the more time you spend in here, the more incremental revenue you can likely generate. So if you don't want to generate any revenue, then don't spend any time in there. And so I think that's also, you have to also, as a vendor, be able to have these very direct conversations with your brands of like, take out the cost of my platform. This is going to be the cost of the people you're going to need to run this, but this is going to be the outcome for
Yeah.
your brands. And I think that's where, I think loyalty is still slow to kind of move into that world of revenue generation, if that sounds correct.
Mm.
I think there's still too many folks that look at it as a cost center, and maybe because their loyalty program is a cost center because they're not operating it correctly. But listen to Chipotle earnings calls, listen to Yum Brands earnings calls. They'll tell you everything coming through digital. That doesn't just mean online ordering. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. No,
there's money to be made there if you invest.
yes, agreed. It's all about what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. Jeremy, appreciate all your insights on the loyalty piece. I want to take a little bit of a step back now and just talk about industry in general. You obviously keep a close ear to the ground on what's going on. What are some of the, what are some of the tech and innovation you're seeing that's super exciting and it's going to really take off the next 6 to 12 months in this industry?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question. I think there's been some exciting tools that have been kind of generated in the last 12 months, like revenue recapture tools. I think the challenge there is that they're predicated on third parties not shutting them down. So the smart ones out there are
Mm.
starting to spin up what I would call like that piece of the tool help them raise money, but that money is going to be invested in other technologies that they're building.
Right.
Those are still yet to be seen. I think they're going to all kind of go in different directions. I think there's been recently a lot of I mean, I think of two. I think of Ovation and Momos have both raised significant money in the review side. You know, I look at that side very similar to loyalty. We used not to name drop, but we used Ovation at Craveworthy, and we all got right on our phone in real time the executive team feedback. So we could take that, we could reach out to a GM. GM got it as well. GM can respond to customer. We can look at the store and say, is there a major operational issue where we need to have our ops teams like drop in because something's not working right? Um, it's I think it's a very lightweight technology, but it actually carries a lot of weight with customers, right? The first time somebody complains, they want a response, right? And this allows you to do that. So that space is obviously, it's not new by any means because of the Yelps of the world, but I think it's being done in a much better way. I think the other big one right now, kiosks are booming. There's no question. The transactions on kiosks are so much higher. I also think where they play a really cool role is I'm a picky eater. So, like, we'll use Taco Bell, for example. I can go to Taco Bell and I can customize the heck out of anything I want to order. Now, is that great for operations? No, but like, it is bringing consumers in that don't want to go up and are bashful at a counter and saying no onions, no tomatoes. But on
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
they'll customize away. So I think, they're that space is doing really well. I think the other space that I keep an eye on, but I'll be honest, I don't have enough firsthand knowledge is a lot of the conversational AI.
Yeah.
Um, I talked to my friends at Costa Vida. They're using Presto and they love it. I look at I watch all of Chris's videos from Bounteous testing out Taco Bell and their drive-through stuff. And again, kind of goes back to our thing, like as long as you're ready, if you're willing to be first to market and know there's going to be some bugs and challenges, then it's okay. But I think conversational AI, I think is really picking up steam.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's really hard to make investments in new tech in this space because we are an industry that are mostly laggards, right? Like if you think about it took COVID to push ordering and loyalty this far ahead, right? So
Yeah.
before that, like I always laugh. I look online and I'll see a CMO or a CIO and they're bragging about their loyalty program. And I'm like, buddy, I met with you 6 times. You said that loyalty had no space in the restaurants. You got hit with COVID and blindsided, and/or you went to a brand that I already put a loyalty program in place and you are now reaping the benefits of it. So we're still in that space where, there's a much needed changing of the guard. And I think it's starting to happen. Some of it's the refreshing and bringing people from, outside the space from retail and other more progressive industries, which I think is
Yeah.
helping grow the brand. If you look at you look at, and I know I talk about Yum a lot, and a lot of it is because I've worked closely with them, but I also think they do incredible things as it relates to overall culture and employees. So, they've brought in people from the golf industry. They've
Mhm.
recently brought people in from Jordan Brand. Like they take chances and they bring in new and fresh outside perspective. And I think the more that that happens in our industry on the brand side, the more that it's likely to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think I've been seeing a lot of cool stuff. And I think even just on the tech side, there's a way smaller barrier to entry from a tech perspective, right? Like nowadays, you can come up with a good business plan, you come up with a good idea, and you can offshore get your MVP stood
Yeah.
up from a product perspective, versus back in the day, that was never a thing. So it's cool to see a lot of these, niche things come up. But to your point, I think it really boils down to, are you coming in to solve a problem, like a core problem in the industry, or are you just trying to get a quick exit
Yeah.
and
Are you creating a fake issue that won't? And
yeah,
that's why I was saying, like, come and work in my stores for 2 days and then tell me if this is a real issue. But I also think you would ask, like, what can we do better? On one hand, us as tech vendors complain about the slow adoption of technology in our space, but at the same time, we're blocking it every day, right? Every day that
Mhm.
you want to go do an integration and they're like 6 months, or they don't want to integrate with you, or they just want to be the one size fits all and push the customer into that. That's also where I think or we're doing our industry a disservice by not growing it
Yeah,
for the right reasons. But again, I can say that, and I think some of this was, again, I hate talking about COVID, but I do feel like that brought our industry much closer. I think a lot of people were very much like competitor or partner, and I think there's a lot more gray areas now, and people are starting to work a little bit more collaboratively post-COVID,
yeah.
than they were pre-COVID for sure.
Yeah, I think that sense of like creating that moat to protect all your own product versus, I think, just on our side, we know this because as a loyalty provider, we need a lot of APIs to be able to connect.
Yeah,
Seeing a lot of even the very, I mean, I hate calling them old school, but some of the brands that have been, or the the vendors that have been in space for a very long time, them starting to open up API documentation where like back in the day that was
yeah.
never a thing. It's good to see, but to your point, a lot of it, I think a lot of what happens in the industry is very knee jerk. It's very reactionary, right? Like we don't see too much of the proactive stuff. I mean, shout out to Toast. I mean, they've had open APIs for years and years and years, and that contributed to a lot of their success. And then they kind of learn and either acquire or build it out themselves. But I think to see some of the bigger older brands start to do it now, it just shows like the changing of the tide from that perspective.
Well, I think it's funny too, because I think it's very easy to use the word like legacy provider and it's taken as a bad thing, but I'd argue that legacy is really means winner. It means
That,
they've won the space for a really long time, right? Like,
yeah, I
and,
agree.
and I mean, if you can't be legacy, if you're legacy, you've been able to pay the bills for a really long time, which means you're probably doing pretty well, right? But I also think that the emergence of and you just alluded to it with talking about like Toast and their APIs, but I think when you look at the Squares and the Qs and the Toasts, the emergence of cloud POS has closed the gap in technology for emerging brands. When you had server on-prem like Aloha and Micros, there was only a couple people that could do an integration like that. Heavy development, right? And even those integrations weren't great. I mean, I
Mm,
replaced both those systems at one of my brands to go to a cloud-based system. But now, like, you have a lot of choices as a brand. And I think where now it becomes even harder is how do you differentiate between Incentivio, Punch, Paytronix, Hang, Spengo? I could go on for 10 more brands, right? Like, and so I think that's where it's important to, as a vendor, be very consultative and be willing to partner with other best-in-class solutions that's going to get that brand to where they
yeah,
want to go. And
yeah,
that's happening a little bit more, but um, there's still a couple companies out there that just want to, go do it on their own. So, you know,
yeah.
have
No,
have fun. Have fun
yeah.
taking that out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of room for improvement for sure, but I still think that's what excites me a lot about this industry is that there's still there's still so many problems to solve, and there's still so much room for disruption, innovation, and adoption from all
Yeah.
sides. And I think to your point, I mean, COVID kind of like supercharge that, and now we're starting to see more innovation happen in the space, which is great. In the same vein, I know it's tough for a lot of brands to be cutting or bleeding edge in innovation because their margins are so thin they can't necessarily gamble.
Yeah.
But I think that that cycle of technology running its course from being bleeding edge to now like mainstream adoption is happening much quicker, right? Like AI, you think about AI and ML, as much as it was buzzwords, it's now become table stakes for a lot of restaurants where they're like, hey, from a marketing perspective, we want to see this stuff AI generated so we can easily go and deploy.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's nice to see, and there's a couple brands in the space that are I've talked to them and really just said like, here's some of the stuff we're working on, like what's important to you guys. But there's a couple brands that are just like, we want everything new. We want to try everything out there. And I'm just like, I love that founder mentality of where they're like, listen, if we fall down, we'll get right back up. We'll try something else. But that's great. But like they're looking for an advantage, right? They're not going to be able to, they can't reduce their food costs right now. They can't reduce their labor. Those are all
Yeah.
fixed costs for them right now. And they're just going, all right, let's figure out a new tool that I can use and get an edge against my competitors. And, I think that says just a ton. Like those are the brands that I want to work with. I want to work with the guys that are willing to make, they sound like big bets, but at the end of the day, they're not really big bets when you look at the low impact of a lot of these systems out there.
Yeah.
And so I think the space is exciting. I'm definitely excited to be back in it. I don't miss seeing some of my competitors' faces, if I'm being honest with you. I like to be on the brand side and, letting them give me a ring to
Yeah.
try to get my
Yeah.
business. But again, it's who you associate with. It's
Yeah.
partnering with like-minded companies and people that are putting the brands first and choose where you spend your time.
Yeah. No, listen, man, appreciate all your knowledge you've dropped here. Of course, welcome back to the dark side. But
Thanks.
at the same time, excited to chat about how we can make the industry a better place. I think at the end of the day, that should be why we're here. I mean, not everyone's in the same boat, but I think, those people always get kind of weeded out and we do
Yeah,
our
I
best
agree.
for the industry. So, we're coming up on time here. So Jeremy, I want to, you dropped a lot of gems, which I'll recap in a second. But before we do that, I want to finish with a quick lightning round. This just gives everybody in the audience or people listening a chance to know you a little bit better. So we'll go through it. Lightning round, first thing that comes to mind. Let's hear it. What's your current favorite cocktail of choice?
Espresso martini.
I love it. That was a trick question. I would have kicked
Oh
you out if
yeah.
you didn't say
Faded.
that. um, in your opinion, who is the greatest athlete of all time?
Michael Jordan.
Why?
Oh, come on. I'm a Chicago guy. 6 championships. I can go.
Yeah,
We
you know
need another
what?
5 minutes for me to go
I
through all of his records.
so you're I got my
Killer
Jordan.
inst
You probably I don't know
killer,
if you could see it.
killer instinct.
Yes. I know you're a Jordan guy just like me. I mean, I got a whole stack of Jordans there, but I was actually going to throw up my Jordan jersey, but I forgot to. So, next time
Sorry.
I'm with you, I will. But um, if you were to open a restaurant tomorrow, what would the vibe be and what would be the name of the restaurant?
Oh man, that's really hard. I would probably,
Didn't even have to be a restaurant. It could be a bar, be whatever, like a
yeah. So I
pop-up.
think
Yeah.
like there was a brand I used to love in Texas. It's essentially, I think a small pizza was $11, large pizza was 13, but then they had bottles of wine up to
Mm,
like $300 a bottle. So your bill would be $130 and it'd be two bottles of wine and one small pizza. I love the concept.
cool.
And the name, Pizzazz.
Pizzazz. Nice. I like
That's
that. I like that. Lunch party or dinner party?
dinner party.
Why?
It's a long day of drinking if we start at lunch.
Yeah.
It's hard to shut down. Yep.
And this I know from experience. So all
Yeah.
those day parties can be fun. You go to bed a little bit earlier and don't feel like crap the next day. But
If you said day pool party, that's different. I'd have to go. I'd
hey,
have
it could have been
to,
anything, man. It could have been brunch pool party. I
yeah.
love that up to imagination. So um cool. And just to wrap up here, Jeremy, if folks want to get in touch with you to connect, obviously you're a big resource in the industry, and a lot of folks I'm sure will want to connect. What's the best way people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn or just my emails, jeremy@hang.com. And again, I talk to folks on both sides of the fence daily on just general industry stuff. Don't feel like if you reach out to me, you're going to be getting some infomercial pitch on Hang. I just love contributing. I love staying current. And so, that was my big thing when I went to the brand side. I never wanted to lose touch with the tech side, and that's why I was still present at every technology conference, even if it wasn't necessarily
Right.
specifically related to my role, is just to stay relevant in the space.
Yeah. Love it, man. Well, Jeremy, I just want to recap some of the really cool stuff you shared on this episode, and I think we could have probably went on and talked about a lot more, but I think some of the stuff that really stuck out to me is all this technology we have. Ultimately, they're tools. It's the person behind it executing that gets the true value out of it. So you can see one brand, three brands all using the same tool, all getting different effects out of it. So it's really how good is your personnel on the other side to effectively manage and execute what you're trying to get out of the vision of that tool, whether it's loyalty, whether it's back of house, front of house, whatever that looks like, which
Mhm.
I think was a great point. And really the challenge for us on the vendor side is how do we make that easier for them, right?
Yeah.
Because the tides are changing. The demographic of people coming into these restaurants of a marketing role, maybe are a bit younger or a little bit different experience. But how do we make it easier for them to execute to make them look like heroes? I think that's really on us to
It's
just
up to us to bridge that gap. We
yeah,
have, I
it's a
mean,
great
it's been
point.
long enough that they haven't been able to do it. We need to help them do it.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you talk about the kind of evolving nature of what loyalty is, right? We're starting to see gamification and all these different concepts come into play to because again, you have to be able to appeal to different generations all through one loyalty program. And it can't just be a cookie cutter feel because the 50-year-old father of three or father of four, whatever that looks like, versus the 15-year-old that is still in high school are not going to be, resonating with the same thing. So how do you really provide that all in one place and make it very easy to attract and retain customers. And then really, some of the stuff that's exciting. Oh, actually, the last piece about loyalty you mentioned, I thought, which was a great point, is changing that, you know, concept of it feeling like a cost center to a revenue generation
Yep.
method, right? So again, I think that's possibly on us because of, maybe they've been burned in the past, or maybe that's just how it is, just as a discounting tool. But how do you truly create that to be your marketing engine and a way to get people in your door and continue to come through, which I thought was a great point. I think that's something that all of us can learn from, regardless of what you're trying to pitch to these brands. And again, because you're coming from the brand side, I'm sure you've been pitched that more times than not.
Yeah.
So, and then just, the exciting things we've been looking at coming up in the industry, revenue recapture tools, the stuff on the feedback side, kiosks we're seeing are huge. Actually, I was just, I did a Europe trip this summer, which everyone jokes that I was there for all summer. I felt like I was, but so
You
many of
were.
the restaurants there, all kiosks, right? Like a lot of the
Yeah.
fast casual brands, quick service brands, like the McDonald's, like there was literally just one person behind the counter, but it's designed that when you walk in, all you see is kiosks. But it was quick. I could go there, order, and just wait and get my stuff. So I thought that was great.
You'll
Um,
appreciate this. I was in London when McDonald's rolled their kiosk out, and it was a very late night, and I just needed to eat. So we walk into a McDonald's, like, awesome, 50 kiosks. I am a tech guy. It took me 45 minutes only to realize that when they deployed their kiosks, they did not set them up to be able to take international non-European
oh
credit cards.
no.
So I was like, I was beside myself going, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And it was even harder because I was a tech guy and it's like 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I had to go behind the counter. They had to ring up a special device and I finally got my 20-piece nuggets. But like that
Yeah.
was my experience with kiosks. Like, and I was like, what's wrong with this? Why doesn't this thing work?
That's funny. And yeah, man, I hear you on that because even my thing is wherever I travel in the world, I do the McDonald's test, right? I'll try McDonald's wherever I go. It's
Yep.
stupid, I know, but it's just my thing. My wife doing it all the time where we will try like a certain meal everywhere we go. And it's funny because when I order through the kiosks, I can pretty much get it the same every time because I can do my additional stuff, right? So I do the McChicken, I'll
Yep.
add some cheese, extra McChicken sauce, whatever. I have my order down pat. But a lot of times, if I do that behind the counter, they'll tend to mess up my order, right? Because of
Yeah.
maybe it's a language barrier, or they're like, the hell, this guy wants cheese on his McChicken. That's not even a thing here, right? So I find there's the only discrepancy there. But for the most part, McDonald's is pretty consistent worldwide. But that I find is the difference. When I order through a kiosk, pretty consistent. If I order directly through a person, sometimes internationally, that language barrier can change
Well,
things.
you think about it, right? It's like it's kind of like integrations, right? The more points of entry or points of touching data, the more likely it is to break, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeremy, man, thanks again. Any last parting words before we sign off here?
No, I think it was great. I look forward to seeing you soon at the next conference we get to, and
Yes.
finding a way to partner together and make a better experience for our customers.
Of course. Love it, man. Jeremy,
Awesome.
can't thank you enough. Appreciate you. all your insights, everything you shared. Again, reach out to Jeremy at hang.com if you want to get a hold of him. We're still looking for guests on the show, so if you're interested, reach out to me at Arun at Incentivio.com. This is another episode of Data Delicacies. We chatted through a lot of cool stuff today, so look out for the episodes dropping every Wednesday. And again, if you want to reach out to me, Arun at Incentivio.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. More than happy to chat. But until next time, peace.